this group is about exposing you to research as it is, getting you to see it as something that you can do, not something that's out there for other people to do. So sometimes people have a view of what a researcher looks like. A researcher looks like any of you with a question or the will to want to change something. So we're very lucky today to have Dr Sara Webb with us, who is going to look at writing for publication. She is the editor of MITRJRC, so she's got lots of experience in this field, but also very open to getting students into research as well. And publication can be really helpful for getting your message out there and also to start you on that road as well. So this is the programme for today, for this afternoon. So welcome and house rules, which I'm doing at the moment. Then we'll have the presentation, breakout room and activity, and then some feedback. So this is going to be a really useful session for all of you. And like I say, we're very lucky to have Sarah here today. Next slide, please, Sarah. Okay, so as in your training and as in being a midwife, this is a non-judgmental environment. So all of those differences that we mentioned in the beginning in the roots, we respect those and are open to hearing other people's ideas and views, because at the heart of it, that's what we do as midwives. But also at the heart of it, that's what happens in research as well. We've got to look at other people's ideas and views and be challenged by them sometimes as well, so that we can do research that can change things for the future, because all of you here at the moment are the future of midwifery. And you should be the ones that are going out there, and if there's things that need to change, be able to have a platform to do that, and research can enable you to do that in order to say this is something that we can implement because it's research based. We are being recorded today, but when we go into the breakout rooms and when you're feeding back, that part is taken out at the end. So you don't have to worry about the question and answer section. And the NMC code I've mentioned, but it's basically feeds into the professionalism. So being open to each other's ideas and listening as well, and just getting the most out of the session. Next slide, please, Sarah. And this is Sarah's slide. So I'm going to pass you over to Dr. Sara Webb, and I'm sure you're going to really enjoy this today. Thank you, Sarah.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm really grateful for you to give me your time to listen and hopefully inspire you into sending articles for publication. So I'm Sarah. I've been a midwife for 25 years. I've worked clinically at the Birmingham Women's for 20 years. And then it's probably 4 years ago, nearly 5 years, I left to come and work for the Royal College of Midwives to manage the Midwives Digest and the editor of that, and also look after the research team at the RCM and things like that. So I'm going to talk to you and hopefully inspire you to send me your work for publication. Bear with me. So why is it important to undertake and publish research or knowledge? Well, we're an evidence-based profession. So everything we do has to have evidence underpinning it, and that evidence comes from you. It comes from anyone that uses the service, anyone that provides the service, and we have to share it so that we can build on it. Generation and communicating of evidence is part of our role. We do it every day when we're caring for people. We have to explain everything that we're doing and the reason for doing it and the reason and what the results will mean. So it's underpinning our work all the time. Your evidence-based insights will help others in their evidence-based practice, and it will help women and other people who birth to make evidence-informed choices. Okay, so you can't make an informed choice and you know the underpinning evidence about that. Published reviews of the literature save everyone time, and they consolidate the evidence for everyone. Now, when I was asked to do a systematic review, I honestly felt like poking my eyes out. with pins. It was just such a big piece of work. I thought, what is the point and what is the point? Now I love them because someone else has gone through all of the research evidence and synthesized it and summarized it for me. So they're a really important thing to do and share. Published service evaluations and improvements can influence the delivery of excellence in care elsewhere. How do we know what's good if someone else is doing something and they don't tell us? And I think this is one of the problems of NHS, in the fact that we are now so huge. All the hospitals, some of them work well together, others work in silos. And it's only when you read someone saying, oh, I started a clinic on twins, you think, oh, we've always wanted to do that. I didn't realise actually people would want to come. And that's how we grow and we develop. Identified gaps in the literature could influence future directions in research. So how do we know what to look into if we don't know what's missing? And then you have a voice and something important to say. You have a very strong voice. As student midwives, newly qualified midwives, your voice is incredibly important because you are hitting the ground and the topics you are looking at are really pertinent and important to share. So I'm just going to do a few myth-busting things. You don't, and okay, myth, you must have a PhD to publish. No, you don't. Okay, it's like people that have PhDs and academics like to carry on with this myth because it makes them feel important, but you don't. You must work in academia to publish. No, you don't. You must have to have ethics to publish. No, you don't. Lots of things you don't need ethics for. Service evaluations, you don't need ethics for. Systematic literature reviews, you don't need ethics for. Opinion pieces, reflective pieces, you don't need ethics. Only research studies get published. No, that's not true. Only studies with positive results get published. That used to happen many years ago, but no, that's not true and it's not needed. We need to know about things that don't work just as well as we need to know about things that do work. You must pay to publish your work. No, MITRJRC is definitely, we don't charge you for publishing. Research is only considered good if it's published in a top journal. Now that's something that a lot of academics will push for, but it's not true. I do not have time to publish. That is something I appreciate. It is quite time consuming, but we can find time to do it and it's important if you can. Case studies and small articles have no value. If they do, nobody wants to read my work. I'm not an expert. Yes, we do. Conference posters are not publications. They are very important things. And I'm going to do a little bit aside about conference posters because your work needs to be shared. So what happens if you to your final piece of work? You've done a dissertation, you've done a reflection, you've done an essay as part of your studies. What happens to it? Does it sit on the bookshelf gathering dust? Or if you've done an audit, a service evaluation or a QI project, does that just get local use? Is that you just use locally and no one else knows about it? Or should you share your knowledge by publication to empower change both nationally and internationally? So don't just have it sitting on a bookshelf and don't just have it used in your hospital. Share what you've done, influence change across the world. Now, one way that we can do this is by using posters. Posters are great. So if you get a conference, like we've got the RCM Student Midwife Conference coming up in November this year, next November. We've got the Education and Research Conference for the RCM going on in March next year. We want abstracts, we want posters, and they're very important because they broadcast the work you do. They generate ideas and discussion amongst people at the conference who then take it back and talk to their colleagues. It builds networks. It adds to your CV, adds to your career progression. And as I keep saying, you've got a voice and something important to say. So you can turn your service valuation, your dissertation into a poster. That poster can be turned into a publication that goes into MITRJRC. So it's actually not that hard. It is time consuming and you might think it's hard, but it really isn't. And then this is a bit jumbled, this presentation, because the abstract, so when you've written your dissertation, your essay, whatever, you can get an abstract out of that. And the abstract is the summary of, a very brief summary of the whole of what you've done. And it's actually a really good piece of work to do because that is then used to form the basis of a poster. which then turns into an article. So the abstract is actually good. And basically it's like and I've put that picture there just to show you, it's like the shopping window. It's the window of your article. It entices people in to read it. So what I do when I'm looking at articles, I look at the abstract and go, oh, that looks interesting. And then I whiz straight back down to the results and conclusions just to see what exactly they found. And then you read the whole thing. So the abstract is really important. It sets the scene, the background, what you set out to do and why, the hypothesis and research questions, how you did it, the methodology, what you found, results and conclusions, and then the recommendations. So it's actually not hard to do. It's just picking the most important threads out and summarising them. Then you can use the abstract as a basis for a poster. And you can get, these are ones that I've got on the internet. There's now great, like, what's the word I'm looking for, performers that you can download so that you can actually have a layout of a poster. When I started doing posters, I didn't have a clue what to put on it, so I just used to use posters that my colleagues, doctor colleagues had used, and just changed the text to fit. But there you have the background, hypothesis and question, methodology, results and conclusions and recommendations, and you can lay it out nicely, and then people come up and they go, oh, interesting, it's really good. Now I'm going to talk to you about turning a dissertation or an essay into a publication. And this looks quite text heavy, but it will be available online as a video. But it's actually not really that hard. It's just a process. And I'll go through all of the little bits of it. So you select a journal, you decide on the article type, and there are like 4 A's that can guide you in planning. Read submission guidelines for that journal. Identify 3 key points that you want your article to make. You write a draft. I'll go through that in detail, reread the guidelines, review the draft, get it read by a colleague or a friend or a relative or a supervisor, revise using the feedback, and then you submit it. So it looks hard, but it's not. The hard part is writing the original dissertation or essay. That's the hard part. Turning it into a publication really isn't hard. You've done the hard piece of work. This is just a process you do afterwards to get it published. So select the journal. You need to really just pick a journal that suits the topic and the article that you want to publish. Obviously, I've got MITRJRC as the big one, pick us, but there are other journals that you can use to publish your work. And then I would suggest that you read through articles within those publications just to see the sort of tone and how people write, what they're looking for, layout and things like that. If you're not sure if your article would be interesting to that journal or digest, then email the author. I get quite a few emails saying, oh, I've done this piece of work on this tongue tie clinic. Is it something you'd be interested in? And you know, and then I can go back and go, absolutely, and things like that. Then you decide on what sort of article you want to do. Is it an opinion piece, clinical experience, research findings, a literature review? So there's lots of different ways you can write an article. And then the 4 A's are just to guide you. What's the aim? Who is the audience that you're targeting? What's the awareness of the current literature and the articulation of key messages? So as again, the first couple of lines are very important in capturing attention. So it's all about getting someone enticed into reading it. Then, as I've just said, read the submission guidelines. Sometimes they can look incredibly daunting. Depending on what article guidelines you go to, they'll talk to you about the font. They'll talk to you about how many references you can have, what type of referencing you should use. But basically just skim through them and write. And then familiar yourself with editorial policies, the standards of reporting, when they might want prisma diagrams and things like that, which you will have covered when you've done your essay or dissertation anyway. Now, this is probably quite an important one, is when you're doing an article, when you've written, say you've done a dissertation or a thesis, and it might be 15,000 words long, and you've got to condense it right back into probably 800 to 1,000, 1,500. You might think, I'm never going to do this. I can't take anything out. You become wedded to every word that you've written. But you can do it by literally thinking of the 3 main points that you want to pull out of that piece of work. It's like when you have to present your work in a presentation, you're given 15 minutes to present something you've taken, maybe 3 years to do. You have to just think, what are the 3 key points that you want someone to remember from that? And that's where you start. And then you identify those 3 key points, and then you build on those for your article. And the key points are often a mixture of the findings and recommendations. And then you write your first draft, which is hard. The first draft is always really hard, which is why professors and supervisors, when they are asked to do a paper, always dish it out to their research fellow to say, you start the first draft, because it's the hardest thing to do. You can always amend and build on a first draft, but the first draft, putting pen to paper, is the most tricky bit. So don't get disheartened. If you do a first draft and you give it to someone to review and they come back and go, God, got confused, what's that about? Didn't understand that. That's perfectly normal and expected, okay? And it should be written in a different style from an academic essay. You want something that's clear, readable, and accessible. And these are all the questions that you need to be thinking of when you've written it. So you write it all out, just put ideas on paper, and then you go back and you sort of think, oh, have I managed? Is it something new? What question? Have I made it clear? Does it flow? Can I move certain paragraphs around? Is my language and level of argument appropriate? And things like that. So these are all the things that you do after you've actually put pen to paper and got an idea of where it's going. And I know this might sound a bit odd, but when I do presentations, I sit down with an A4 piece of paper and I draw little squares and I just think, right, I've got, I don't know, let's say 15 minutes. I need a maximum of 10 slides. First slide's an intro, end slides a thank you. And then you just start planning out what content and what sort of topic goes on which bit. And one of the hardest things I said before was reducing the number of words. As I said, you get bedded to everything that you possibly have written. You think, I can't possibly take that out. Everything's important. But when you write a dissertation or an essay or a thesis for your studies, you have to justify everything that you've done and the reason why. So you need to remove, when you're doing an article, the methodology justification. So that slide, I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but on the left, this bit here is part of my PhD thesis. And all of that chunk of text was reduced to one sentence in my publication, because I didn't have to justify why I had chosen a certain study type to use. All I had to say is, I did this study type. So that's really the biggest way of chunking out text when you're doing a publication, is take out all of the justification text that your supervisors are looking for to ensure that you know why you've done something. Also, you don't duplicate data in boxes within a text. So when I did my PhD, I would have huge tables of data, but I'd also have to write about it. When you do a publication, you don't. You can just say the results are in table 1, and there it is. You can also reference reduce. So when you're doing a thesis, you're able to put as many references as you can find to justify a statement. When you're doing an article, you only need 1 or 2, and the most recent or the most important. So once you've done that, you reread the submission guidelines, review the first draft, amend it, and then you get a colleague, friend, family, someone to read it. And again, don't get offended if someone comes back with loads of... I remember when I did an article once, I gave it to my supervisor and it came back with so much red pen. I honestly could have cried, because I was like, I don't understand. But that's good, because that person's taken the time to actually give you feedback and help you restructure it. So just take that on board and go, okay, it might flow. And you know this, when you're involved in something, it flows very well for you because you understand it. When someone who doesn't know about it reads it, they can think, well, it's not really flowing the way that I wanted it to. So hence you can then go back and review it. Then you revise it with feedback, check spelling references and everything else, and remove anything that they've said isn't necessary. And then you submit. And I go back to this one and say, why is it important to undertake? And I've highlighted it adds to your CV and career progression. Years ago, we progressed through our profession because we'd done it for so long. You are band 5, after a year you get your 6, you're a 6 maybe for 5-6 years, band 7 comes up, someone will go, hey Sarah, have you thought about going for the band 7? You've been here a while now. Things have changed, and it should never really have been like that, but now we are career building. We have specialist midwife roles all over the place, and you need a CV that demonstrates that you're not just a midwife that's been in that role, but you've actually done extra work, you've got publications, you've presented posters, you're looking wider, as we should. And this one is to show that it's not just research that gets published. Reflections, anatomy and physiology, clinical care, opinions, service improvement, changes to legislation. All of this stuff is important to share because we spend all our time working, looking after the women and the birthing people that come to our services. And it's sometimes you forget what else is going on and you only know that by reading about it. And these are just some studies I've picked out because I thought that they were really interesting. And Lisa Rollinson was a student, I think, at Leicester University. And she did a reflection about continuity in midwifery practice, a case study. And I thought, great, I love reflections because you sometimes lose track of what other people think about things because you have your own view. And it's until you read a reflection, you might understand another person's perception of that situation. So that's a reflection that was good to publish. Service improvement, midwives' experiences of safer infant sleep, discussions at a Southwest London hospital. And this was done by some midwives that had done service improvement for sudden infant death syndrome. Another opinion, why reducing health inequalities matters. And this was like a reflection opinion piece. Someone actually reflected on the Embrace report and thought, I'm going to write about this because this is important to me. I love this one, the anatomy and physiology. It really was good. It was from a student midwife, Louisa Pirrie, and she was looking at urinalysis, and she was just reflecting on, do we really explain to women properly why we do these tests and what the results mean? And I thought, actually, we do things so often now, it becomes routine to us, and we just assume women are going to understand it. But when someone says, why are you dipping my urine? What does that protein mean? Does it mean bad things? You need to remember, actually, we always should remember why we're doing things and have an easy way to explain to our service users why we're doing it, what the results mean. So that was a nice one to publish. Another reflection opinion, underrepresentation of Black women in UK research, a really important piece of work. We know this happens, but we have got a lot of publications that explain it and want more changes. So this was a good one to publish. And then another one I used as a hot topic, a reflection. Emily is now a lecturer, I think, and I think she wrote this about her experience as being a student. So again, really important piece to publish. And the other reason it's not only research that gets published is they add to our knowledge base. Everything adds to the knowledge base. It doesn't have to be a randomized controlled trial for it to be important. And I'm going to present now some slides that is not meant to showcase me, but it's meant to demonstrate that stuff that you might think is not important, years later underpins big pieces of work. So I started out when in 2004, the Birmingham Women's decided to do some triage service. In the past, if I was caring for a woman and there was a woman coming in with prolonged rupture of membranes or SHROM, they might say, oh, Sarah, what's your lady doing in room 10? And I'd say, oh, she's fine. She's only like early labour, second baby, she's fine. She's on gas and air. Oh, could you take this admission into room 9 next door and sit? I said, yeah. And then we thought, actually, this isn't really worth doing because you're then not giving one-to-one care for the labouring person. So we then started our own little entrance triage service. And then I thought, I'm going to actually write a little paper about this. Is there a role for triage in midwifery? Because at that point, I didn't know of any other hospitals that were doing it. And then come many years later, we've got BSOTs, which we now probably use in all the hospitals in the UK, a triage system. And I remember meeting Sarah Kenyon and her saying, I read your article in Midders. Obviously, it didn't underpin the need for BSOTs. The funders needed higher level evidence than that, but it was a piece of work that showed that actually triage had been around in midwifery since 2004. And then looking on to the OAC care bundle, I worked as a specialist midwife in the team at the Birmingham Women's, looking at women with OAC, and I wrote 2 articles, one in 2007, one in 2011, looking at the specialist perineal midwife role, which we now have as an established role. Back then, it was just something we did locally, and I published these 2 papers. Again, they haven't made the OAC care bundle happen, but it showed that this was something midwives were fundamental to these things back in the early 2000s. So it's just trying to say to you, don't think that anything you do isn't important enough. It is. Sometimes it takes 10 years for that thing to happen, but your evidence will underpin that happening.